Hi, good morning. I'm Mr. Leomar Christian Giniello, and I'll be teaching Chapter 3, Print Media, of our subject Introduction to Communication Media. For the objectives, we're going to identify the features of the print media, to learn the different types of print media in detail, to learn about various print media, such as newspaper, magazines and periodicals, and books. To getting started, uh, way back 1457, Johannes Gutenberg invented movable metal types. Okay, this means that this invention paved the way for mass reproduction of printed materials. So, as we learned in the last unit, the primary print media's components of print media are three: books, magazines, and newspapers. So, they are different in terms of binding, regularity, content, and timeliness. Okay, so though the means and methods for production are similar to a certain extent, now you can see on the table that they're different. For example, on binding, the books are produced in the forms of stitched or glued, while the magazines are stapled, and the newspapers are unbounded. Okay, same thing goes on with the regularity, content, and timeliness. They are different uh, in this aspects. Now, for the newspaper, newspapers are periodically published documents that carry current information about the society. So, newspapers, just like the term itself, it produced news. Okay, but on the early newspapers, before the publications of newspapers were not unlike today daily. It's most likely uh, published weekly or bi-weekly because of the absence of adequate technology and news gathering system. Okay, so because of the power press, it paved the way of the mass production of the print media, specifically the newspaper. That's why we're having a daily reproduction of newspaper. The power press or the printing press, they make it possible. So the first published uh, newspaper was Ben Harris, while on India uh, it's entitled Bengal Gazette. But Ben Harris published the public occurrences. Okay, so on the characteristics of newspaper, we all know we have to consider that newspaper is considered as a form of print media which is more credible and accurate. Okay, it can also be used for future reference, and it's a very favorable medium for everyone, for the people, especially for the middle and working class, because they can use it in their uh, free times. Okay, so it has a diverse content, and uh, and at the same time, this is the advantage of newspaper on uh, against the radio and the television, which is newspaper. You have this freedom or the the time to choose whenever you wanted or whenever you want to use it. Unlike the case of radio and television, you have to prepare for the exact program or the assigned time for a certain program that you want to watch or you want to listen. Okay. Now, for the roles of newspapers, uh, in the early years, it is a newspaper is like a center for debate. It's run by scholars, political leaders, reformers, and revolutionaries. Uh, if you're going to take a look at on the several histories around the world on the rules of newspaper, you can see that it is true. It was true that that this this kind of print media are providing argument, for example, the government to provide intensify awareness, freedom for the people. It has the capability to raise public opinion and alternative thinking. Okay, that's why the historians called it the adversarial press. Okay, now for the circulation, as I've said a while ago, uh, uh, during the 1800s, the popularity was because of the popularity of the newspaper. It was it was being sold in the street at a very low price. So to the point that they called it like a penny papers. Okay. Now for the characteristics of newspapers, we have a lot. Okay. We have the predominance of news-oriented content, regular periodicity, feature reference facility, choice of the time of use, just like what I said a while ago. The literates medium, low cost, multiple users, textual medium. Okay, I'm not gonna going to discuss every characteristic of newspapers, but let me pick two. Okay, first, the literates medium. Unlike television or radio, which you could listen or you could watch, uh, uh, reading a newspaper it demands literacy because as of this time, most of our newspaper, for example, broadsheets, it's written on English. Yep, and then they're using some uh, words, some phrases, which could which the literate people could understand. Okay, unlike on the case of the television and radio, was more specifically on the case of the television, which you're just going to watch it, you're just going to understand everything. Okay, and and there is a news reporter in a television which explains everything, and there are also variety of programs which can be in your language or which could be in English. Well, same thing goes on with the newspaper. It has uh, a Philippine language, but most of the newspapers, specifically the broadsheets, they're written in English. So it takes a lot of education to understand it. Okay, and next is it's multiple users. Yeah, as I've said a while ago, uh, aside from the liberty to determine what time you want to use it, uh, it has also the ability to be used by multiple users. When I'm finished reading this newspaper, when I got what I wanted to, uh, my family, my colleagues in work, my neighbors could use it, could borrow it from me as much as they wanted to. Okay? So those are the characteristics of newspapers. Now we have different types of newspapers: the calendar, the tabloid, and the birdliner. Uh, uh, Broadsheet or the calendar is the largest of the various newspapers formats. It's a very big type of newspaper, uh, typically 22 inches and 559 millimeters or more. Okay, so it's the biggest form. It's the biggest type of a newspaper. Well, meanwhile, the tabloid, it's the smallest type of newspaper. Okay, normally. Uh, it's very popular in the United Kingdom, and I think it's very popular as well in the Philippines. We have different uh, tabloids you can see on our sari-sari stores, on convenience stores, which could actually, what's the main hint about this kind of newspaper is you're going to see some eye-catching phrases, title in their headlines. Aside from the size, you can those are the difference. Actually, the visible differences, but there's a lot. But those are very visible characteristics which you could differentiate between a broadsheet and the tabloid. Now we have the Berliner. Berliner is slightly taller and marginally wider than the tabloid format, so it's kind of bigger than tabloid, but it's commonly used in European newspapers like The Guardian in the United Kingdom. Okay, so Those are the types of newspapers. So we have different structures of newspaper organization. Uh, there are people behind on producing a newspaper, which are it's subdivided in six main departments under the direct supervision of the publisher, who manages the company's entire operations. Okay, we have they have different departments. You can see on the screen. Now, for the content creation, uh, basically, as I've said a while ago, publisher takes all the charge on the uh, operational going purposes on the newspaper. Okay, like advertisement, circulation, legal matters, HR, and the accounts, everything, almost everything. Now we have the editor. It's responsible for, uh, of course, for editing the newspaper, and we have, and under the editorial department, we have the news gatherers and the news processors. Uh, we also have the reporters, which, of course, they gather the news independently or under the guidance of the desk. Okay, so for the recent trends, because of the advent of technology nowadays, we have these POD machines or print-on-demand machines, which enables the production of newspapers or the publishing of newspapers in on the only the required number of copies, and can print earlier copies in memory as and when required. So it equipped the publishers to determine a certain required number of producing a copy. Okay, so at the same time, you can see that uh, internet ha, has this disruption uh, cost towards the industry of newspapers. You can see that because of the existing of the World Wide Web, there the emergence of electronic version of the newspaper came, uh, and you can see it on online. You can see the same articles online and the same articles published on the hard copy broadsheets. So to make it more accessible and to keep up with the pace of technology nowadays. Okay, so moving forward, we have magazines and periodicals. Unlike newspapers, magazines are periodically publications carrying non-news items. Okay, so the first magazine was the Andrews Bradford's American Magazine and Benjamin Fraukin's Journal Magazine. Okay, it's a French word magazine, which means storehouse. Okay, it's a collection of stories, ads, poems, and other items that editors believe will interest audience. Okay, so this is the main difference between the magazines and the newspapers. Okay, uh, the essence, the content of magazines is towards the interest of audiences, while the newspapers is to inform the public about the news. Okay, about the app updates. Now, uh, magazines are somehow costly, and it's like an elitist affair during the initial period. It's like earlier magazines cannot be considered before as mass media because it only serves a small section of the society, which are the elitists, because it's costly. Now, in the later part of the 20th century, uh, wide reach of television posed challenges to magazines as programming imitated magazines in their content and presentation, targeting magazine audiences. Now, what makes magazines different from books and newspapers? Magazines are not published daily like newspapers, uh, but its periodicity is longer than normal newspapers, and most likely it is being published like weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. And unlike loose sheets of newspapers, magazines are produced as bound volumes. Okay, so most likely magazines are for the entertainment purposes, and it also contains poems to comics and cartoons to photo feature. Okay. Uh, okay. Like newspapers, magazines also play a vital role in defining modern society. Okay, so it provides general interest magazines and cultural and literary magazines form a social mindset that shapes our cultural identity and consciousness. Okay, it also it prompts the society to purchase more, consume more, and perish. So this is towards the marketing aspect of magazine. Okay, and also women magazines general objective to be to be to give you an example is for example it is women empowerment. But what's happening nowadays is that this basic task is not performed in most cases magazines. uh, the which are commonly succumbed to advertising pressure. For example, women magazines publish advertisements depicting ideal body images of women, considering them as visual treat for the male audience. Okay, for the types of magazines, we have a lot. We have a lot. We have business magazines, we have consumer magazines, literary reviews, academic reviews, news magazines, and comic books. Okay, so now for going for the books. Books is like the invention of movable metallic types. Books were expensive and large in size. Okay, they were affordable only to the wealthy, aristocratic people like political and religious leaders and businessmen. So, but the Gutenberg's invention changed the situation. Okay, so because of the invention, the printer reduced the price and made available to more people. So the first book published using the metallic movable types was the Bible. Now, for the characteristics of books, there's a lot, okay? But the common thing that you could determine whether it's a book, books are dealing with a single subject, okay? And books remain afresh since they deal with subjects significant for a longer period, unlike newspapers and magazines. So it's being stored for that reason for a longer period of time in public or private libraries. That's why you can notice that in libraries there's a lot of books, unlike newspapers and magazines. Okay, that explains everything. Now, it's also organized in a manner that readers can access to the interest parts easily. So, who read books? Okay, uh, who read books? Actually, everyone read books, but as I've said a while ago, there's a certain uh, category of books, classification of books, which a book reader could actually choose. Okay, so for example, on the children, you can see that they're into the for example, in the Harry Potter. Okay, pardon for the for the spelling of Harry Potter. So at the same time, while meanwhile for the academic community, for us, for teachers, for scholars, for students, we are into academic texts and books. Okay, that we're using in our class. Okay, we also have business books. We also have trade books like hardbound and paperback books, which are targeting general readers. Okay, children's books, the professional books, okay, the books being used by lawyers, doctors, managers, engineers, and other occupations. Textbooks which are being used academically, this, as I've said a while ago. Oh, so there's a difference between hardcover and paperback. Paperbacks are low price, having cheaper, flexible cover and pages. Okay, so in terms of durability, because it's paperback, it's it actually lacks durability unlike the hardcover. Hardcover is hard. Uh, it's hard case. It's made on a hard case. Meanwhile, for the we also have the university press books. we have religious books, and because of the disruption brought by the technology, the industrialization, and the internet, we have also this digital publishing. Okay, or so-called ebook or electronic book or digital books. So you're not just going as of this time. Before you could read books by buying the actual book, but as of this time, we have digital publishing. You can read on your tablet, on your laptop, on your cell phone. Okay. And then now for careers in publishing, there's a lot of job opportunities in publishing. For example, graphic designer, an author, freelance writer, something like that. Okay. Now, that is our chapter for uh, print media. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a good day.